Weddings in Fuller View Beyond the Aisle with Julia Fuller Weddings. I'm Julia.
I'm Jackie.
And welcome to day 6 of Podcastmas. If you've missed any of our other episodes, they are in our YouTube and Spotify, so go check those out. Episode 5, we took a little break from the wedding day, wedding journey, and talked about bridal showers. And so we linked a lot of the mood boards down below, so go check that out for some bridal shower inspiration. And today's topic is all about
wedding guest list.
Because we know how hard that is.
Yes, building, managing, all the things.
It can be very stressful, and it can be something that
could be the elephant in the room at a family dinner.
Yes.
I mean, it has caused lots of problems.
So we decided we would break it into 3 segments to make it easier to follow along. So we'll be talking about setting boundaries for your guest list, building your guest list, and then tracking RSVPs.
Yeah.
So let's dive into setting boundaries.
So number 1 needs to be budget.
Yeah.
You have to know what your budget is in order to know what your guest count is. Most of the money is tied to catering.
Yeah.
Rentals. And so you have to know how many people are going to come.
Yeah.
And sitting down with everybody who's involved in paying for the wedding needs to have an honest conversation.
Yeah. So if you and your fiance are the only ones paying for the wedding, then you two are the only ones that need to be in that meeting. But if you have other family members that are contributing, you really do need to sit down and talk about.
Everybody needs to know the expectations, because everybody's going to want to invite somebody.
Yeah.
And in order for it to be fair, everybody needs to be involved in that conversation.
Yeah, because it can get really tricky down the road.
Yeah.
When it comes to that. So setting a budget, number 1. Number 2, you have to know how much your venue can even hold.
Yeah.
So venue capacity. If you are getting married at a venue that has a chapel and a reception hall and they can only hold 350 people, well then you don't even need to be inviting 450 people, you know? So
same goes if you are opting for a smaller venue and it has, capacity is 100, you can't invite 200 people.
Right.
So
knowing that capacity and your budget, because also back to the budget, if you're inviting 100 people, your budget's going to look a lot different than if you're inviting 300 people. Yeah. So understanding...
everything is tied to that guest count.
So understanding your initial budget and the venue, that's where you need to start.
Yeah. So once you've established your budget, and it's a clear, realistic budget, and a budget is really something that your wedding planner can help you with.
Yeah.
And they should help you, because we are the ones that know the prices out there.
And see it,
And most prices are a shock for the bride and groom. So having somebody experienced in the industry that can help you set that budget, lifesaver.
Yeah.
Because it's realistic at that point. A second one is then establishing the rules. So, for example, are we going to give everybody a +1?
Yeah, because this can get really tricky. So you do need to establish this before you even go into building your guest list, because something we like to follow is if they're in a long-term relationship, if they're married, if they're engaged, or if you and your fiance both know their significant other, then a +1. But things are so expensive nowadays that you just can't give out +1s to every single person invited.
Right.
So, sitting down and determining who is going to get a +1.
Right. And that's a conversation that needs to be had.
Right.
And then from there, that will need to go on your
wedding website.
Yeah. It needs to be clear and on there, so that when people, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but when people go in an RSVP, they see that rule.
Yeah.
Because people will try.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people don't know.
Right. Because I feel like a long time ago, everybody did used to get +1s, but it maybe wasn't so expensive. But it's just too expensive now.
Right. So that's a rule.
Yeah.
And then a second rule that needs to be established, I feel, is kids or adults only.
Yeah, for sure. Because it does make a big difference. And you two sitting down and determining, do we want kids? And obviously, if you're going to have a ring bearer flower girl, you can have some kids, but not give...
Everybody
can't bring their child.
Yeah.
Or you can. But understanding if you want kids or not is going to help when you start managing that guest list.
So let's talk about some hard conversations also. Like when you are determining your guest list, and you have, and this might be for later, but let's say that you have a family of 5, and you know that your family, the bride's family, is going to invite the parents because they're close, and you're close with one of the siblings because you grew up with them. That doesn't mean that you have to invite all 5.
Right.
You can invite the 3. And it's done all the time now. You don't need to invite the younger sibling or the older sibling that you don't know, because
you don't know them.
You don't know them.
No, I completely agree. You don't have to invite the whole family just because you're inviting the parents and one of the kids.
Right. Or you're just inviting the parents.
Or you're just inviting the parents and none of their children,
Or the same goes, you're just inviting one of the siblings and not the parents. Right. I mean, it just has to be, you just have to understand as you're building who matters most.
And you also have to understand, before we move into managing the guest list, that it doesn't matter how hard you try to not offend people, people are going to get offended.
Right.
Like, it always happens.
Right.
You can't avoid it. So as long as you and your fiance and whoever else is on the same page when you set these boundaries, then it does become difficult if one of the families, let's say the bride's family or the groom's family, wants to invite third cousins twice removed just because they feel like they need to extend that out. And we hear all the time, well, we're going to invite them, but they're not going to come. They come, or you're wasting money on an invitation when you don't need to.
Right, when you could invite maybe some more people that are more significant in your life. But that does happen, that they want to invite family that they don't see all the time, because a lot of them end up coming.
Yeah, they either come or, again, you just wasted money on an invitation.
Yeah.
So definitely setting these boundaries before you even construct the guest list is going to make it so much easier when you do start making it.
Right. So now that you've established your budget, the venue capacity, your plus ones, and
kids or no kids,
you can move into how to start building this. So let's talk about first the bride and the groom sitting down with their individual guest list.
So one thing I always tell our brides is, when you sit down, start making columns. So you're going to have an A list and a B list. Break those A list and B list into columns. So we're starting with the A list, break it into family, friends, coworkers, and others. And those others are going to be people maybe you grew up with, but you don't talk to that much anymore, but we grew up together, you know, just kind of those other people that don't fall into the other categories. So you two sit down.
Must-haves. Your must-have, his must-haves.
Make your columns, and then from there you can determine how many other people can be invited. So let's say, for example, you know your venue can hold 300 people and you can invite 300 people based off your budget. Well, when you and your fiance sit down, let's say you only get to 150 based on your A list. Well, now you can go to your in-laws or whoever else and tell them this is how many people you can invite, because we all know that everyone else wants to invite people too.
Right.
So determining who y'all want to invite first and then going out to your in-laws or other family members, that's how it needs to go.
And the same thing goes if your venue holds 300, but your budget, your realistic budget that you had help making is for 200 people, you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
the bride and groom need to keep that in mind when they're looking at their guest list, because his parents and her parents are going to want and need to be able to invite some of their people too. So just because your venue holds 300, if your budget isn't set for 300, then that needs to be realistic, and 100%. That will save a whole lot of headaches.
Right. And after you make that list, let's say people start RSVPing well, then you can start pulling from your B list, or you can start pulling other people that you may have forgotten.
Having an A list and B list is such a great idea.
It's so helpful. And as you're doing this list, since you've already determined like who gets a +1, or if we're having kids or no kids, it's going to make writing that list so much easier, because you know, well, okay, my best friend gets a +1, but this friend doesn't, because that's not in our rules.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And also, you're always going to have those people too, and we could have talked about this with rules, but that text you, like, assuming they're invited.
Yeah.
So make sure you and your fiance talk about that too. Like, if someone does randomly text assuming they're invited when they weren't on your guest list, what are y'all going to do? How are you going to go about that?
Right.
Are you going to make an exception? How are you going to handle that? Just because you do have people that assume they're invited.
Yeah.
When maybe you didn't think to invite them.
And a lot of feelings can get hurt, because the way the guests are looking at it, if they've never planned a wedding, the way they're looking at it is, oh, well, they're inviting 300 people and I didn't even make their top 300.
Yeah.
But there's so much more into that, and you don't get it until you are
doing it.
Literally like, in the moment.
Let me say a personal story real quick. So my husband and I grew up in the same town. So we grew up knowing from the same people, went to the same high school, same middle school. We college in the same town, like grew up in the exact same town. And so I feel like everybody expected to be invited to our wedding. And it's one, we can't afford that. And we just can't invite everybody.
Yeah.
And so people do get their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
But setting those rules, setting those boundaries, and as long as you and your fiance are okay with who's on your guest list, that's all that really matters.
So to recap, start with your must-haves.
Yeah.
Your family, your close friends, and start expanding outwards. Yes. Then it'll go to coworkers, other friends, other social circles.
Yeah.
So
and then your family member or your in-laws can start inviting their people.
Right. And the same needs to go for them.
Yeah.
You give them the same columns, the family that must be there.
Yeah.
Not who you think you need to invite. Right. The family that must be there and start expanding it outwards.
Yeah.
And then as people start declining, you can start moving some in from that expanded circle.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's move into how we now track the guest list. So we've talked about the guidelines and the rules, how to build your guest list, and now let's talk about how to track it.
Okay.
So you want people to be able to RSVP the easiest way possible. And I feel like a long time ago, everybody used to send out the RSVP envelopes.
And that is definitely the more formal way to do it.
Yes.
But a lot of people just don't. Even though you stamp it and it's pre-stamped, people just don't return it.
Especially like the younger generations, you're going to hop onto their wedding website and RSVP there.
Yeah.
And so if you want to make it the easiest for your guest list, we always recommend putting a QR code on your invitation. It's easy. If people click it, it goes straight to the website, they RSVP.
Right. Nobody even goes to a mailbox anymore, even to put it in.
Yeah.
And so your older population that may not know how to use a QR code, I'm sure they know somebody they can call to help them RSVP. But if you're inviting 300 people to send out 300 pre-stamped cards, definitely starts costing. It starts adding up.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of your wedding websites, when you go in, they track everybody for you. They download a list for you, so you automatically know who's RSVPing. It's just easier, and like a lot of mail can get lost.
Yes.
So
yes, invitations get lost all the time.
All the time.
Yes.
And so, just to make it easy, scan a QR code or put a link on your invitation if you don't want to put a QR code. Make it easy for everybody. Yeah. It's easier on you. It's easier on your guests. You don't have to keep up with who's returning RSVPs.
Right. And then, of course, number one rule is setting a deadline.
Oh, for sure.
So 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you start texting.
Yeah.
Because that gives you like another week to text.
Well, so 2 weeks before your wedding date is when your rentals are going to be due, your catering is going to be due. Like, your guest count's going to have to be pretty much finalized 2 weeks before.
Oh, yes. It's going to have to be finalized.
It's going to have to be finalized, yeah. So setting that deadline 4 to 6 weeks before your wedding, like you said, it gives you extra time to send out those text messages.
And not only that, 4 to 6 weeks really is a realistic number because a lot of brides now are doing seating charts. Well, you have to have time
to make it,
to make the seating chart. Yeah. And so 4 to 6 weeks is really good for lots of reasons.
Yes. And if most wedding websites have things where you can send out automatic text. So you don't even, like, if you feel weird texting them from your personal number, a lot of the websites will do it for you. And they'll send like, hey, reminder, your RSVP is due for this wedding, like go RSVP.
Yeah.
If you don't want to text from a personal number. But I always suggest when the deadline comes, send out some of those automated messages. And then if they're still not responding, send a personal message.
Yes.
Because sometimes they just don't even click on the automated messages.
Right.
And so if they see a personal one.
Right. And
they might click it.
It's important that you know.
Yeah.
It's just, people just forget, they get busy. And I don't know why RSVPing is so, but I mean, I found myself doing it too.
No, but
you
I
think
do
you
too.
did it.
Yeah.
And, but you have to know.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
Well, like you said, the seating chart is huge.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want a bride to be doing is make a seating chart, and then someone RSVPs 2 days before the wedding and has to figure out how to plug them in to
or
a
has to
seating
tell
chart.
them, I'm sorry, but the deadline
But you
has
can't
passed.
come. Yeah. And yeah,
that's way more awkward than sending a personal message 3 weeks out.
Yeah. And with rentals too, you have to know for rentals if you're getting chargers, or you have to know how many chairs go on a table. Like, there's so many things.
There's a lot of things that go into it. Yes.
So making sure they have an easy way to RSVP to make it easy on yourself, and then send those reminders.
Yes.
So let's just recap everything we talked about, because it was 3 different segments. So segment 1 was budget and venue capacity.
Yes.
And rules.
Rules. Yes.
Super important. Segment 2 was how to build that guest list.
Yeah. Your must-haves.
Yeah.
Then your friends. Then your social circles that extend
Break
outward.
it apart. Make it easy. And do it early. Do it early. Make that guest list early to make it easy. And then segment 3, how to track those RSVPs. Make it easy on everybody.
Yes. Establishing those rules and those guidelines early on between you, between the bride, the groom, and the bride and groom's family will save a lot of awkward situations.
For sure.
Whether groom's family or bride's family, one is inviting more than the other, it just helps if everybody's sitting there together, everybody's on the same page. Everybody can give their opinions then, because they will be giving their opinions. So everybody can do that all together, and then everybody's on the same page.
Well, like you said, the last thing you want is to have, like, walk into a room and it be awkward. Like, they wanted to invite somebody, or they don't know if they could invite somebody. Like, that's the last thing you want. So, yes, making sure everybody's on the same page is perfect.
Yeah.
So we hope this episode kind of helped you guys with the guest list, because we know how hard it can be and how stressful it can be. And that is the last thing that a bride and groom want to deal with while they're trying to plan their wedding, is the stress of who to invite.
Yes.
So again, like you mentioned this earlier, a wedding planner can help you determine your budget and the guest list.
Yes.
We have so many different ways of helping our brides determine who to invite, how to invite people, just all the conversations that might be awkward.
It will save a lot of tears and a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And we know the prices that are out there, and we can prepare you for that kind of initial shock factor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode.
And we hope that you guys are getting your Christmas shopping done.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We have a week till Christmas.
And we have been procrastinating.
Yes.
But we got it done. Yes, please get your shopping done. Subscribe to our YouTube, watch on Spotify, all of the things. Go catch up on our past episodes for lots of fun, a wedding inspiration.
Yeah. See you soon, and
happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
We'll see you guys in the next episode of Weddings in Fuller View Beyond the Aisle. Bye.
Bye.